Okay, so I've got this ritual practice here. Now I think, I did just want to add one other thing. Instead of setting this thing by my bed and praying when I wake up in the morning, what if it's in the foyer in the church, and I walk in and I bow my head and I pray in front of an image when I walk into the church?
Yeah, I would say at that point some people are going to start to get uncomfortable, but I'm not sure that they actually have a reason.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's just going back to that matter of feelings.
Okay. Well, so but explore it a little bit. Why would that be more uncomfortable than me praying at my bedside?
Well, honestly, I think I'm going to attach a lot of it to like fears of the historical excesses and abuses of the Roman Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
And like those fears have been ingrained into generations of Western Christians.
Yeah.
Like my examination has led me to the point where I can't really find reasons beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
Like including my own past experiences with those feelings.
Yeah, right. Is there anything else to like why that becomes a problem when it's in a church? Because in some ways that does feel different to me than something that I do privately.
I think it's because people tend to look at the church as a place of worship,
Mm-hmm.
probably.
Yeah.
So you're starting to get into the idea of whether or not you're worshiping this versus worshiping
Right,
that. I think that plays into the idea
Okay.
of people being
Yeah.
fearful of it.
Okay. I think that's good because I don't like to have an American flag up in the front of a church, and I don't oppose the American flag.
Right.
And if somebody's gonna like put their hand over their heart and sing the national anthem, at the beginning of a ball game, like that seems positive to me mostly. But when you put it in the front of the church, then I think like this should not be in the front of the church.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a kind of reverence that you pay to it, and you could use the word worship, or we'll just use the word veneration. There's a kind of veneration that you pay to the flag, but don't put it in the church. So I think you could use that same argument. It's okay what you're doing by your bedside. It's okay to have a kind of veneration there, but don't do that in the church. I don't know. You want to pick that apart, because I think there's a logic to that.
I think there is a logic to that. Maybe I was a little too dismissive in my own statement, but I still struggle to find an actual justification for, suddenly putting religious imagery inside of the church is wrong for this reason.
Mm-hmm.
Because the things that we're talking about that are wrong, the examples of things being wrong are actually non-religious images that are being put in a religious space.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's taking something that's ultimately not directed towards God and putting it in a place where it shouldn't be. So I think the argument that you're going to make, if you're saying it's still okay to have a religious image here, is because it's still directing your attention towards God and not like some other thing.
Yeah.
And I would feel like as long as that remains the measure, you can probably keep going further with it.
Yeah. Well, I say if you have the flag in the front of your church, then probably one nation under God is an important part of your national theology, nationalistic theology. And so there is a sense in which it's connected to God, and putting it in the front of the church is a statement that the flag is under God, or that the nation is under God.
I mean, maybe I could see that point if you were putting it in the foyer to the church, or even in the back of the church, but not in the front.
Mm-hmm.
Because the front is where your attention is drawn.
Yeah, right.
And so like you're the act of putting the flag in the front of the church is kind of a subconscious signal that this is one of the things to which you have declared allegiance.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you're putting nation up there with God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you could also interject there that the flag is like David said, the flag is definitely pointing you to something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very debatable whether or not that's actually pointing you to God.
Mm-hmm.
However, you could also make the argument that like an image or not an image or an icon of, say, Michael the Archangel is definitely pointing you towards God.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I think that's not going to be obvious to everybody, though.
yeah, that's true. That's true. But
Right, and if you say like, well, we were talking about in the front of the church, so let's just use Mary as the example, you know, I mean, in the Orthodox churches we've been in, we've got gigantic painting of Mary in the front of the church. Now, we'll talk about Mary in some future conversations, so I don't want to get too much into the significance of her, but like somebody who's opposed to the tradition will say, no, that's not pointing you at God, that's pointing you at Mary, and you're putting her in the place of God, and that's idolatry and no good. That doesn't fly.
right, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, it's like David said, to some people it's not so obvious why that would, like the example I used of Michael the Archangel, why that would actually point you towards God.
Right.
Which is fair.
Yeah. And like all I would say to that is that just means you actually have to have an understanding of what's being imaged with these images.
Right.
I'm not going to quite agree with the argument that says, well, there's the potential for them to be misunderstood and misused, so that means that you just shouldn't have them. Because that potential exists with everything in the
Oh,
Christian
it certainly exists with Scripture.
Yeah, it exists with Scripture, it exists with baptism, it exists with the Lord's Supper,
Mhm.
it exists with like literally every aspect of the Christian faith.
Yeah,
It
right.
exists especially with doctrine.
Mhm.
We've talked about how the
charismatic leaders.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked about how doctrine was used at the beginning stages of the Reformation as basically an excuse to use the sword. So, yeah, that there's that danger with anything.
Yeah,
Right.
right.